We'll take a look at the NFL season, the 101st NFL season. John Clayton, Washington Post, 710 ESPN. We'll get his. Yesterday we did our who's in and who's out, Hunter Brody. We'll get John Clayton's who's in and who's out. Who does he think are in and out this year in terms of the playoffs? Which teams are the sleepers? You know, somebody texted in yesterday and said, we picked all chalk. He didn't like our picks. We went all chalk, which he's kind of right. Like, there's usually a team that made the playoffs or two or three that don't make it the next year. I think every team we picked was a playoff team last year.
I didn't pick the Vikings. I would think people would probably chalk them into making the playoffs.
There was a playoff team that got added this year, too.
Oh, that's very true.
So keep that in mind. So let's bring John Clayton in from the Washington Post and get his thoughts on this NFL season, which kicks off tomorrow night. And, John, I'll ask you, I mean, you're a football guy. You cover the league day in and day out. Does it have the feeling that it normally does, or does it just not seem like football is ready to go tomorrow night?
No, I think football is ready to go. It's just going to be a different kind of football because no preseason games, no off-season programs. You know, nobody has been able to really evaluate where they are as a team, and probably 3-4 weeks into the season, they're still trying to evaluate it. But I think the great part is we have football, and you can see that they conquered so many things. I mean, you know, people wanted free agency, not people in the league wanted free agency to start late. Well, they worked through that, and it worked out. They kept everything as far as the draft. That worked out. You know, people were worried, okay, how many people? I thought there was going to be about 140 players report getting the virus. Well, here we are 6 weeks into training camp, which is now over, and the start of the season, and there was only 118, and about 3 or 4 of them are still on the list. And so overall, they've done a remarkable job of getting through this, and I think that the way you look at things, I mean, I can't tell how bad the pandemic's going to be 2 months from now, but I think they can make it through 17 weeks.
Let's hope. And, you know, you just mentioned that. How many weeks do you – like typically the preseason you get a couple of games, but nobody even really plays in the preseason, and they usually use the month of September. Those first 4 weeks are kind of like the feeling out. How long do you think until we see a finished product? Maybe the best, you know – when do you think the teams will all start to kind of turn out of that preseason mode?
Yeah, I think it's going to be probably week 5 or week 6, you know, taking into account the 4 games that'll be played before then. But, of course, you're right about the sense that in reality, I mean, you only have maybe 2 games where you have the starters out there because they're going to be out there for one series in the first preseason game, if that now, because you had about 9 coaches last year that decided, hey, we're not even going to play our guys. Then you go about a half in game 2, and then game 3, you go into the third quarter, and that's about it. But now what you can look at is that, you know, these guys haven't hit anybody. I've had 14 padded practices, and most teams may only had about 11 padded practices. So when you put all that together, it's just going to take more time. That's why I think week 5 or 6 is going to be the determining factor on where these teams are.
John Clayton's with us over at the Washington Post. He's got his preseason predictions here. We did ours yesterday. I'd love to pick your brain on a couple of these interesting races. Everybody seems to love the Bills. Are you leaning Bills or the Patriots still until they prove us otherwise?
No, I actually took the Patriots out of it because even though you still have 2 things working in their behalf, Bill Belichick and Cam Newton, but when you look at the fact that they're down 4 linebackers, their top 4 linebackers, 2 of their top 3 safeties, you know, they've lost, maybe on defense, 38, 40% of their defensive snaps. You know, they don't have a right tackle, and because Marcus Cannon decided to opt out. You know, they're weaker at the wide receiver position and at tight end. You know, Mohamed Sanu got cut. They didn't hardly add anything. And then you have Larry Izzo and 2 tight ends who are rookies that are going to have to play a lot. I mean, they're going to have to rely so much on that rookie class to be able to do something. So I look at the Patriots as being maybe an 8-win team, where I look at the Bills being more of a 10-win team. And if that's the case, the Bills win the division.
In the AFC South, you have the Colts. Now, I like the Colts, and I like what Philip Rivers can bring to the table when he's playing good football, of course.
You have the Texans, I have the Titans, John has the Colts.
Yeah, I have them in the wild card spot. The thing with the Texans is I just feel Bill O'Brien gets them there. I don't know if he can take them over the hump when they're actually in the playoff games, but I think he gets them there. But you're going with the Colts, and it seems you are believing in Phil Rivers.
Yeah, because, I mean, what I look at is that, Philip Rivers didn't have a good season last year. Part of it was a bad offensive line, and whatever wasn't working on the offense. It just didn't seem to work out. But now look what he has going to Indianapolis. He's got the best offensive line he's ever played with. never played with a line this good. He's got, T.Y. Hilton. They got Michael Pittman in the draft. They got two great running backs, Marlon Mack, who's a 1,000-yard runner. They got Jonathan Taylor. And then you look, they're decent at tight end. And again, this is Phillip Rivers reuniting with Frank Reich, who was the quarterback coach and a former coordinator with him. And, he's gone in there and taken total control of the team. And to make things even better for the Colts, and this is why I have them as an edge over Tennessee, is that, what you're looking at is that they play an easier schedule, particularly an easier schedule of quarterbacks. And so if you have Phillip Rivers going against mostly the young quarterbacks, I'm not talking about, Lamar Jackson or talking about Patrick Mahomes, but they face so many young quarterbacks. That's where the edge is, and it puts them over the top. Jadeveon Clowney's signing, puts the Titans closer, because what I look at is I think the Colts win 11, and then right now I had probably Tennessee for 9, but now I think you put them to 10 and possibly 11, but I think the tiebreaker is going to be with the Colts.
John Clayton's with us. We're looking through his picks for this NFL season, which kicks off tomorrow night. Ravens 14-2 last year, but no Big Ben in Pittsburgh. Does that make this division a little bit more interesting, or is it still the Ravens in a runaway?
No, it's going to be close because Pittsburgh, you can say technically Baltimore has the easiest schedule based on last year's records, but also what you're looking at is that Pittsburgh technically has an easier schedule. If you take the Ravens off, and so let's say it's going to be a split, Pittsburgh's schedule is a 398. And like the Colts, Ben Roethlisberger is going to be going up a lot against younger quarterbacks who haven't proven themselves. And so that's where the advantage is. And so let's say Ben is Ben, and I think Ben will be Ben, and that puts them at 25 to 27 points a game. Their defense now put together with the moves that they made last year was able to be a top 5 defense. So if you're talking about scoring 25 to 27 points and giving up 20 or less, you're talking about 12 wins. So I look at this being a very close race, and it's not out of the question for Pittsburgh to be able to have a little bit of an edge on Baltimore.
John, I think everybody out there listening likes the Chiefs. You do too, so we'll spoil that for everyone. But the Wildcards amazingly has a team from the West in there. Who are your AFC Wildcard teams? Because another spoiler, no New England. They are out of the playoffs altogether.
Yeah, so what I did is I put Denver because I thought that they had the most improvement of all the teams, I think, in a very improved AFC West. And of course, what I didn't realize is that after having the column posted that Von Miller would be out for the season, I guess all of a sudden I picked Denver to go as a wild card, and next Von Miller's gone. So now they can't have Bradley Chubb and Von Miller together for the second straight year because Chubb had the injury last year. But I still look favorably at the Broncos because look at that 3 receiving core. And it's like, I don't know where you stand on this, but of all the good receivers, particularly the top 3 receivers in this draft, I think Jerry Jeudy was the best of the 3. Because I know Ruggs has the speed, CeeDee Lamb is going to be great in Dallas, but what you look at with Jeudy and the scouting report on him, he's kind of a combination of either Antonio Brown and Marvin Harrison. And then you're talking about, I think he's going to be that good. And so with the 3 receiver set, Cortland Sutton made the playoffs or made the Pro Bowl last year. They've got 2 good backs right now in Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay. Their offensive line's shaky. If they can hold up on defense, which now is going to be more of a challenge, I think they can make it in. I definitely have Tennessee in there, and even more so with Clowney. And then, believe it or not, I'm actually putting the Cleveland Browns in. And the reason I'm putting the Browns in is they've been underachieving for so long. But you look at the fact that they have 6 Pro Bowl players on offense, 4 Pro Bowl players on defense. There's not many non-playoff teams that have 10 players who have been to the Pro Bowl.
That's interesting. With the Cleveland Browns, what do you anticipate Baker Mayfield being like this year with another change to, the coaching staff?
Well, he played decently, obviously, in the first year in the league, but their team wasn't as talented as it is now. Second year, he was more talk, and they were more talk than they were action. He got sloppy with his footwork. He was poorly coached. The play calling was awful. There was so much distractions because they seemed to be talking a good game and playing a bad one. But now what I look at is that Baker came in better shape. He seems to be more focused. He's not bragging as much and saying all the stupid things that he said last year. So I look favorably on that. And again, they've got great offensive talent. I mean, they got 2 Pro Bowl wide receivers, 2 Pro Bowl running backs. They got Joel Bitonio on the offensive line, and they got a good tight end that they picked up in free agency. And again, they're still decent on defense. And so I think they finally cracked the wild card. And this will be the first time since 2014 that you basically have 3 teams from a division going into the playoffs.
All right, let's flip over to the NFC real fast. We'll kind of work our way up because I know, John, you're out there in Seattle. Everybody's looking at that division and saying, wow, all four teams really have some sort of thought. I mean, I know Arizona is one of those sleeper hot teams, but if things go their way, so of the four, who's the best in the West?
I think at the moment today, the Seahawks have a slight edge, a very thin edge over San Francisco, whereas just like in Indianapolis and Tennessee, it may come down to a tiebreaker, maybe the same thing with Pittsburgh and Baltimore, but it may come down to a tiebreaker. But, you look at the 11 wins Seattle had last year, and here they were going into the final 2 weeks of the season, down 3 running backs, a backup defensive tackle who was suspended. Josh Gordon was suspended. They'd lost their starting tight end. And here they were going into the last 2 home games, Arizona and San Francisco. They were the number 1 seed, and they were probably for talent the 5th best team in the NFC, if 5. And so now what comes back is that were it not for a missed call on a pass interference at the goal line on one of the last few plays of the game at home against San Francisco, they would have beaten San Francisco for the division. Okay, so now you look at what's Seattle done. They've assembled probably one of the most talented secondaries in football. They were able to get Jamal Adams, and I don't know if you've watched Jamal Adams. This guy's a freak. He is so good. I mean, he's a combination of Troy Polamalu and Brian Dawkins. And with his 3 Pro Bowl seasons, there's some people think that he's got Hall of Fame potential. They picked up Quandre Diggs, a 2-time Pro Bowl alternate. Shaquille Griffin was able to go to the Pro Bowl last year, and they picked up Quentin Dunbar, who at least has at Pro Football Focus said he was the second best coverage cornerback in football last year. So they've got a little bit more pass rush, which was missing totally last year, and they're quicker and faster at the linebacker spot. You throw all that together, and I think that gives them a little bit of an advantage, not much, but a little bit, for a San Francisco team that I think will go from 13 wins to 11. No DeForest Buckner, no additions in the secondary, which was much needed. A lot of injuries at the receiver position, and it's not the same. And so overall, I think that Seattle has a decent chance to at least maybe win the division.
Down south, everybody loves Tampa, but the Saints are saying, don't forget about us, and you seem to be on the don't forget about New Orleans train.
Yeah, I do, because I think they're the best team in the NFC. Because again, they got the real good defense. And what people, I think, you talk about what's the best way to do it. Do you build from the secondary to the front? That's what Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll do. Or do you go the San Francisco, Washington way, and you build from the defensive line back? Well, technically, you look at what Sean Payton's done. He's done both, because he's put a lot of investment for first rounders and trade ups and things like that to get good defensive linemen, and almost tried to get Jadeveon Clowney over the weekend. But also he's real good in the secondary, because what people don't think about is Janoris Jenkins. They got on a steal and on a waiver claim, and he goes there. I think he's still one of the better cover guys in football, to go on the other side of Marcus Lattimore. So I look at the Saints as a team. It's like they built from the front and they built from the back, and then they've got a great offense.
What are your overall thoughts on what's happening in Tampa, though? Because, the Tom Brady effect, and they pick up Leonard Fournette, and they have the exciting talent of the wide receivers. And I don't know, I'm with you where I think the Saints still have enough, but this Tampa team, it's going to be so intriguing.
Oh, absolutely. Because again, it's like, clearly they're going to be a wild card team at the very worst, but the moves that they've made, because look what's going to be there. It's going to be a big year, I think, for Brady, because one, he's got Rob Gronkowski and 2 good tight ends on top of Gronkowski. He's got the best wide receiver duo in football in Chris Godwin and also Mike Evans. And he's now got 3 running backs, Ronald Jones, Shady McCoy, and then you throw in Leonard Fournette, and they're okay on the offensive line. Their defense was the best run-stopping group in football. So, I think what it comes down to, and maybe I'm over-exaggerating this, I think it's going to be Saints 13 wins and Tampa Bay maybe 11 or 12.
All right, John Clayton, Washington Post. He's got his full predictions. In the North, the Bears won 2 years ago. Then you had Green Bay. You like somebody different this year.
Yeah, I like Minnesota, because even though I think there's going to be a drop-off in Green Bay, not to the point where they might miss the playoffs. I mean, some people have them going down to 8 and 7 wins, and I don't see that. But there was a little bit, not a fraud, but a little bit that really kind of helped Green Bay get the 13 wins. Number one, they had the easiest schedule in football based on the records of last. They were 8-1 in one-possession games, and normally you drop when you do that. They didn't add anything at the wide receiver position. Technically, they hardly added anything to their team, where the year before, they go out and they added 2 pass rushers to get 25.5 sacks, Preston and Zadarius Smith. And what did they do this year? They let their $10 million linebacker Blake Martinez go, replaced him with Christian Kirksey at 6.5, and then they let Brian Balaga, $10 million right tackle, go and replace him with Rick Wagner, and he's not even going to be a starter. And that's it. Devin Funches went on an opt-out, so they didn't add anything. Minnesota suffered a lot of losses, but I think what's going to happen is, and even though it looks like Daniil Hunter may not play in the opener, but they were able to get Yannick Ngakoue, and so now they have the combination, once they get on the field together, of 2 defensive ends who can get 25-plus sacks. So I think that may put them over the top.
All right, here in the East, seems to be a 2-team race, and you have Dallas, I don't know if edging out Philadelphia, but you have Dallas beating Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big gap because, you look at the Dallas team, and again, they're going to have to break some things up next year. Philadelphia's going to have to break some things next year. But what you're looking at is they got, now with CeeDee Lamb out there, one of the best 3 receiver sets. They've got Ezekiel Elliott. They've still got a good offensive line, maybe not as good as it was a couple of years ago. Their defense is still kind of young and decent. They've been able to add some nice little parts. So you throw all that together, and I think that they have the chance to maybe get 11 wins. Where you look at Philadelphia, they're kind of, they're a little older. They're still questionable at the wide receiver position. They got a great quarterback in Carson Wentz, but who takes unfair criticism because it's like, oh yeah, well, he's always injured. It's like, wait a second, he suffered the injury in the Super Bowl year, and then last year his really only true injury was basically getting a helmet hit by Jadeveon Clowney in the playoff game. So it's like, that's unfair because I think he's really good, but I think they can still make the playoffs, but I think as a wild card.
All right, John Clayton, his wild cards, by the way, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, Green Bay. No Philadelphia, but obviously that Green Bay, you said you're a little iffy on them, so that could be – that extra wild card is going to be very interesting there. And let's go down to the end and see how it all – we got Chiefs and Texans tomorrow night. Will the Chiefs be standing on top again in this 2020 season?
I think they will because, again, I think they have such a big edge. They were able to keep, they still have they try to keep 20 out of 22 starters, but then Rashad Breeland got the suspension, and they, had an opt-out with Laurent Duvernay, and because it was up in Canada as a doctor trying to help the world out and help the pandemic and all this stuff. But I think in the end, it's like Kansas City has the best quarterback in football, and usually the best quarterback tends to win. And I think he gets to the Super Bowl, and I think he goes against Drew Brees in what should be a great, great football game.
All right, his Washington Post column on the NFL appears every Monday. John Clayton with the biggest storylines of the weekend and what they mean for the days and weeks ahead. Follow him at John Clayton NFL. And there you go, our NFL preview with John here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. John, thanks so much.
Hey, thank you.
All right, John Clayton, like all guests, up here via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.